name is Writer Histories. Welcome to my channel.
My name is Paulo, I'm 35 years old, and I want to share with you the scariest episode of my life. You may doubt it, but I swear on everything holy that everything I'm about to say really happened. However, I must warn you that you need to have a strong stomach to hear my story. It was late at night, around 3 a.m., when I woke up, but not completely. My body was paralyzed, but my eyes were open. I could hear, see, and feel everything around me, but I couldn't move a muscle. I had heard about sleep paralysis and read a lot about it, but I had never experienced it before. Desperation took hold of me as I tried in vain to move. I started to notice something strange in the corner of my room, a dark, humanoid silhouette. It seemed more like a shadow than a solid body, but it was there, fixed, staring at me. Observing more closely, I noticed that this figure seemed to wear a flowing black cloak, which was bizarre since there was no wind in the room. The entity didn't move, just remained staring in my direction. I was paralyzed not only by sleep but mainly by fear. A fear I had never felt before. A shiver ran through my entire body when I saw this entity because that was the only word I could use to describe it. The creature raised its arm and began to walk toward my bed. I had never felt so helpless, so vulnerable as in that moment. My eyes were wide with terror, and my breathing was the only sign of life in me. I was too unconscious to scream, but conscious enough to feel overwhelming fear. The creature continued its slow march toward me, making no sound. However, as it approached my bed, I could swear I heard a low, almost inaudible whisper coming from inside it. It was a guttural, inhuman voice that seemed to recite some kind of mantra repeatedly. I tried with all my might to understand what it was saying, but I couldn't. The only certainty I had was that this voice was not of this earth. The entity stopped beside my bed and leaned slowly over me. I could feel a cold energy emanating from it, making my chest tighten and an unpleasant sensation fill me. I wanted to scream and move, but I couldn't. All I could do was stare directly into that darkness while lying there, frozen, in my bed. It was minutes that felt like an eternity while that entity was on top of me. Then, in the last moment, I felt something cold touching my forehead, and the voice of the being resounded clearly in my ears, saying something I didn't understand, but I know I will never forget. Then, the entity slowly left, just as it had come. I stayed there, wide-eyed, still immobile, but this time out of fear, until the sleep paralysis began to fade and I regained movement. I was drenched in sweat, trembling and scared, but still alive. Was it just a dream? I swear on everything holy that it was real to me, that entity visited my house that night. It was the worst and most frightening experience of my life, but it serves as a warning to never doubt the things we can't always explain. My name is Sofia and I'm 23 years old. The incident I'm about to recount occurred on a typical Wednesday night. I was finishing my day at university around 10 p.m. I study medicine at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, a renowned institution, but located in an unfavorable area, especially at night. That day had been exhausting, with theoretical and practical classes, studies, and exams. I was completely drained as I made my way to the bus stop, feeling my head pounding from the long hours of study. Part of me just longed to get home and collapse into my bed. My routine was always the same: walk to the bus stop and catch the bus that dropped me just a few blocks from home. However, that day, I decided to take an alternative route. The street was darker, with dirt roads and little traffic due to the time. I just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. Darkness hung in the air, and silence was only broken by the distant sound of passing cars. That's when I felt something strange, as if I was being watched. The feeling of discomfort was clear, and my instinct warned me that something was wrong. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, and my heart began to race. I turned around quickly, but saw no one. The street was dark and empty. That's when I realized that, tired as I was, I had forgotten to charge my phone before leaving, and it was dead. Fear began to overwhelm me, and instinctively I started walking faster. The footsteps behind me also quickened, and stumbling, I tried to run, but my hurried steps only made me trip even more. I ended up falling, and looking back, I saw a figure standing in the darkness, almost reaching me. I felt trapped in complete panic. Then, in the blink of an eye, I heard the siren of an ambulance in the distance. With no other choice, I started screaming and ran towards the noise. I spotted the ambulance approaching and ran frantically towards the vehicle, reaching out my hand and shouting for help. Luckily, the driver saw me and stopped the ambulance just in time to avoid hitting me. The two paramedics, Carlos and Ana, heard my alarmed story, welcomed me into the ambulance and, though intrigued and somewhat frightened, decided to help me. It was lucky that they happened to pass by just at that moment. On the way to my house, the paramedics insisted on taking me to the hospital, but I refused. I just wanted to go back to where I felt safe. I still have nightmares about that memory, despite the scare. However, I am extremely grateful to Carlos and Ana, these two angels who appeared in the scariest moment of my life. And the lesson remains, from that day on, I never walked alone again. My name is Helena, I'm 43 years old, and what happened to me and my 4-year-old daughter Ana still scares me to this day. It all started when my husband and I hired a new babysitter, Ira, a 36-year-old woman. Her resume was impressive, with many years of experience and excellent references. She seemed like a calm woman, with a friendly smile and sweet eyes. Taking care of my Ana seemed like an easy task for Ira. However, strange things started happening. One night, while tucking Ana into bed, I noticed a slight bruise on her ankle. I asked if she had fallen in the playground, but she denied it, saying that Yara had held onto her foot tightly during playtime. At that moment, I felt a pang of concern and decided to stay vigilant. I began to pay closer attention to the interaction between Ana and Ira. The radiant face that my daughter used to have now seemed cloudy and worried. That bubbling joy of Ana had disappeared and was replaced by apprehension. One night, while putting Ana to sleep, I noticed a crumpled paper in her school bag. Unfolding it, I saw a figure holding hands with a baby. I rushed to talk to Ana and asked who was in that drawing. With tears in her eyes, she pointed to the shadowy figure and said Ira. The next day, I gathered my courage and confronted Ira. She seemed surprised, quickly defending herself and accusing Ana of being a very imaginative girl. For a moment, I almost believed her, but something in some dark corner of my mind told me that something was wrong. So, I decided to take action. I installed hidden cameras at home. On the first night, what I discovered was beyond what any mother could imagine. In front of Anna's crib, Ira was acting strangely. She was caressing a doll with my daughter's image, her soft voice resonating in dark prayers and threatening promises. At that moment, I paused the video, my heart racing in shock. Immediately, I called the police and Ira was arrested that same night, catching everyone by surprise, especially me. To my surprise, we found out that she was involved in an occult sect and planned to kidnap my daughter, for reasons I never came to understand. I reassured Ana that she was safe now and that the wicked woman wouldn't hurt us. Luckily, my motherly intuition, combined with the technology of those recording devices, allowed me to protect my daughter from that terrible babysitter. On that fateful night, I was just 18 years old and lived with my mother, Mrs. Teresa, a 50-year-old woman, in a modest yet cozy house located in the outskirts of Sao Paulo. My name is Cristina, and in our neighborhood, most people are honest and hardworking. However, in every neighborhood, there's always a gray area. In the back of our property, sharing the same wall as our storage shed, lived Jonas and Louise, both around 30 years old, drug users, and violent, who hid behind the facade of a junkyard. On one of those disturbing nights, I was alone at home because my mother had traveled to visit my sick grandmother. There was little activity on the street, a typical winter day, with a gray sky and drizzling rain signaling the onset of night. I made a strong cup of coffee to keep myself alert and stayed in the living room, reading a book in an attempt to find some peace. However, the silence of the early morning was abruptly shattered by the sound of something leaning against the old front door, the creak of wood against the cold floor chilling my blood. Fear gripped me, my hands trembling like leaves in the wind. I tried to stay calm and headed to the humble phone in the hallway, but I heard heavy, dragging footsteps outside the house, the sound of leaves being stepped on. Soon, the knocking on the door started, insistent and brutal. I feared it was Jonas and tried to push away the dark thoughts. Terrified, I ran to my room at the end of the hallway and locked the door, leaning against it as I slowly slid to the floor. My knees could no longer bear the weight of my body. I tried to ignore the noise of the front door being violently knocked down, my hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my skin as I struggled to contain a scream of panic. The ground shook with the menacing advance of the intruder, and I realized that staying there would be my end. In a last gasp of courage, I ran to the window of my room, facing the street, and without hesitation, I jumped. I had never before realized the height of that window to the ground, but luckily, I landed on a bush, cushioning the fall somewhat. I fled from there as fast as I could, to the nearest house, Mr. Zay's, a 70-year-old man known to everyone in the area. With adrenaline pumping, I banged on his door with my last remaining strength and explained the situation, horror etched on my face. He immediately called the police, who arrived a few minutes later. The house was ransacked, and Jonas escaped through the back when he saw the police car's headlights. Since then, patrols in the area have increased, and Jonas and Louise seem to have disappeared. I hope my story serves as a warning to so many other young women facing similar circumstances. Believe me, you are stronger and braver than you think. Never allow your financial situation to justify living in constant fear. Ask for help. No one needs to face this struggle alone. My name is Marcos and I'm 34 years old. I'm here to share a scary experience I had with my wife, Carolina. It was late autumn and we decided to venture on a camping expedition in the mountains of Rio Grande do Sul. I'm a nature lover and have experienced camping and hiking, while Carolina, despite enjoying the panoramic views, didn't have the same level of experience as me. On the second day, after a long hike and setting up our tent in a clearing by a stream, we lit a fire and began exchanging stories under the starry sky. Carolina was telling a funny story about her younger brother, and the sound of the stream and the night noises of the forest created a peaceful soundtrack. Little did I know, the night held a big surprise. Around 4 in the morning, I suddenly woke up with an urgent need to urinate. I grabbed my flashlight and went into the darkness, easing Carolina's irritation at my sudden awakening. I went to a more secluded spot to not disturb her. As soon as I finished, a cold whisper passed by my ear, and a dark figure crossed the faint light of my flashlight so quickly that I could barely process what it was. I froze instantly, my mind starting to imagine all sorts of forest creatures. I followed the reflection of glowing eyes that disappeared into the shadows. Even though the temperature dropped below zero, a cold sweat ran down my spine. I felt a presence that paralyzed me for a while, until something cold touched my back, preventing me from moving. I entered complete panic. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest at any moment. I just wanted to go back to the tent and hide. Moments later, I regained my composure and quickly returned to the tent, waking up Carolina and telling her what had happened. She laughed, joking that I must have dreamt I was watching too many horror movies. No matter how much I insisted, she didn't believe me and quickly went back to sleep. However, I spent the night wide awake, peeking out of the tent, listening to eerie sounds of the wind, and imagining that at any moment, that figure could appear. The dawn never seemed so far away. With the first rays of sunlight, after a sleepless night, we searched the area for any sign of what I had seen, but all we found were tracks of known animals in the forest. Carolina teased me for the rest of the day, but I couldn't forget that figure or that moment.